to stand at the front to make this speech today because, as you may have noticed, there's some cameras in here now. Because it was Hear Yourself Think was so successful last year, we decided what we're going to do is we're going to record these and then we'll put them on a web link afterwards for people to have a look at, be able to download, and hopefully share across our event community a bit more. So welcome to the first Hear Yourself Think for 2020. They are, for those of us who haven't been to one of these before, there are a series of talks that we hold here where we find topics of creativity, of technology that we think are interesting to our event community because we'd like to share those ideas and share those ways that we get creativity, we get spark in what we do. Bushra is going to speak to us about haptics, future technology, fashion, how that all mingles together, how it's changing, what's possible now and what the future of that might be. There's no requirement to go through us at PRG. If you want to chat with Bushra about anything afterwards, please feel free to contact her direct. This is purely where we'd like to get a meeting of minds together, a meeting of ideas, and we'd like to facilitate that because we're interested in it too. Okay, thank you very much, and with that, over to Bushra.
So thanks everyone for coming and thanks to PRG for inviting me. I'm Bushra Burge and I have my own studio, surprisingly called Bushra Burge Studio. And so like a funny thing happened actually. I usually, most recently I've been talking a lot about sustainable narratives, considered design, activist content, and I'm doing one tomorrow. I also will be teaching at the RCA and even at South by Southwest I'm doing a meetup. So why am I talking about touch? I felt really compelled because this is an events company to talk about this one, ingredient in multi-sensory stories. But it's kind of like the last few months is an unusual topic for me, though it's central to my work. Basically, my studio is made up of a bunch of creatives and technologists, a motley crew of people, and probably similar to where you guys work. And we really like to mix everything up so we don't have many boundaries. Also, we don't even within ourselves, everyone is a creative and a technologist. We try to think in different ways, we consider things differently. And in that sense, when we're considering innovation, prototyping, experiences, we always sort of ask, where does the experience start for us? When someone enters the room and they think about it, when they are, smelling it, touching it, there's no stimulation. Where is it? I don't know. Like, how many creatives are there here? Or would you all say you're a bit on the creative side? That you're in the industry. Yeah, exactly. And technologists. Okay. Storytellers. Whether it's like whoever, whatever you are outside of your job, you probably are in your job as well. Touch. I've always felt, maybe something you guys as well, that there's been a real dominance of visual and audio stimulation and technology. And really, I think it's from where the funding has been, the big companies have taken it over. So touch has been pretty much quite neglected. And yet it's the one sort of sense that we can't avoid it. It's very difficult to avoid. And coming from kind of biochemistry background as well, it's always felt very weird how we interact with technology and in terms of wearables, how it's like an affront of technology onto us rather than designed for the body from the body. And these are sort of, aesthetically and materially. So these are kind of the things that have been going around in my head for the last few years. And at the end of it, our experience can only be holistic as well. But the way technology serves us or serves our senses is quite disparate to the sensorium. Aldous Huxley actually described the feelies of his 1930s satire, Brave New World. So he envisioned a world in which touch would be exploited by technology of the future as much as vision. But it's not quite happened. Right, I'm just gonna, I don't know if anyone's seen this film.
There's nowhere left to go. Nowhere. Except the Oasis. A whole virtual universe. People come to the Oasis for all the things they can do. But they stay because of all the things they can be.
Can you feel this?
Yeah. It's the only place that feels like I mean anything. The Oasis was the brainchild of James Halliday.
Hello. If you're watching this, I'm dead. I created a hidden object, an Easter egg. The first person to find the egg will inherit $500 billion and total control of the Oasis.
Has anyone watched this film, Ready Player One? Yeah, what did you think of it?
Brilliant.
You know I don't like this film. we talked about this before. So,
Entertaining, but a bit daft is what I thought.
bit daft. Still a bit on the dystopia. You know, we are controlled, we are fighting. You have to be in the system to fight. You know, the agency is kind of lost unless you're sort of completely embedded. And there's another quote by William Atkinson in Computing with Feeling. So, touch is now only approximate sense. We can perceive objects or forms by touch only if we are directly in contact with them. And touch communication mediated by touch interfaces and computer can remove all these limitations, expanding our touch horizons beyond present limits, which is very much explored in gaming and these kind of films. But it's quite sort of a cold, unemotional statement because you can't avoid touch at all. So I sent out some questions, which we didn't. I just like to see if people give a response. So for you guys, how important is touch to the experiences or events? Do you even think about it? Yeah. Do you want to say?
Well, you say about the audio-visual thing. I mean, 75% of the stuff that we get comes through our eyes, around 13% through our ears, and then the rest is split across the other touches. But touch and smell and taste, you can uber-personalise with those. And people have really stronger memories with those than they do with taste and smell and touch than you do with something that you've seen or heard. So I think it's really important, yeah.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
Well, it relates back to memory, and then any time that we can relate anyone back to memory, which then will have more of an impact on their experience with the experience itself.
Yeah, and particularly because we are so sort of saturated by audio and visual, how can you make your experience more interesting and personal and engaging and deeper?
And they keep trying to do it, don't they, in cinema with like the seats that move and enough water that splash out at you and bits of taste smells. They still haven't got it quite right, but
Yeah.
they're really trying to get that enveloping experience, and they can only get it by engaging with the other senses of smell and touch.
But touch is opt-in.
Touch.
You touch something, you opt into the experience, and that makes you own that particular part of the experience.
Yeah, it's less passive, isn't it? It's less passive. It says so. It's empowering in that sense. I mean, with the Ready Player One, it's like I could be like, or with Avatar, I'm lying here, I have no agency. But actually, when we show it in our experiences, it's very much empowering.
So I think
go on.
touch is probably the most forbidden sense, because if you go to a museum, it's please don't touch.
Yeah.
And it's very personal as well. So I think it's the most, on the boundary, and maybe the most disruptive sense that potentially is there for the events world.
Yeah.
It also doesn't distribute. I think those senses don't distribute, so it makes it much less portable experience.
But if you think about how if you're creating memory about feeling something for the very first time, if you look at an album cover or a piece of paper that you remember, I think it's something that we take for granted, and we don't necessarily always sort of have an awareness of that feeling until you've actually touched that thing for the second time, like an old record or an album cover or something like that, where you actually do have a bit of texture. And I think it's really, really important.
I think that's two really interesting points. That obviously there's a lot of laws about touch, and whether you might break something, or whether if someone touches you, are you allowed to do it? Where are the boundaries with that? And it can freak people out as well. And similarly, the taking for granted there's a subconscious level that. It gives you, on the one hand, it gives you agency. You choose to touch it. On the other hand, you can't. There's no. It's hard to articulate it back because it hasn't been packaged or commercialized or distributed, and it's hard to distribute because I think it hasn't been developed in that way to be distributed. But the potential is there.
There's another thing I was thinking is in sort of critiquing creative. Most people say it doesn't feel right.
Yes.
Yeah? Rather than it doesn't smell right.
Mm.
Or it doesn't look right. People say it doesn't feel right. Because it's
Your feelings and facts.
Yeah. So feel, touch.
Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting.
Yeah. It's interesting. Maybe that subconscious level.
Is that about quality? Because I do a lot of specialist 3D printing in plastics, and when you want something to feel substantially high quality, we might load the print or fill the print to give it that kind of sense of weight, which goes back to the gold standard and quality materials, a thin plastic. So, and obviously the tactile use, the hands have a massive proportion of brain power used to process what they do. So if you're engaging a larger part of the brain, and I know your work isn't all about hands and gloves, but if you're physically using that part of the brain, which is much larger to deal with these sensations, and there's also sensations of quality of an object, then you're just dragging in, aren't you, all those kind of parameters and making something much more, I'm involved in experiential, but you're not gatekeeping the experience by saying keep off the grass or don't touch this, but you're actually really drawing people in through their senses, and they get much more sense of ownership of it.
Much more sense of ownership, and you do get muscle memory as well, and touch memory. So I find that really interesting. So I've put, can it feel personal? There's one, on the event copy, we put a thing out there saying, can a digital synthesized touch like phone haptics? Haptics is, for instance, touch basically, but like the buzz of the phone, the notification. Can it ever feel personal? Like how do we have a zap on the phone and we respond to it like slaves, really? Should it ever feel personal? There are a few products out there like Cute Circuits, haptic hug shirt, which have buzzers and are buffered in. Do you think, what do you think about that notification zap? Good, bad, personal? Any critique on it? Makes your life better?
It's interesting you say that, because you can actually assign different buzz patterns on your phone, and it's instant how quickly your brain picks up on that. Oh, it's so-and-so sent a message, and it's more intimate, because you're associating that physical sensation with a person, a family member, and it's a brilliant filter.
Yeah.
You can just ignore, oh, it's just an email, or oh my goodness, my daughter's messaging me or something. So again, you're anchoring into emotion, because you emotionally associate a trigger, which happens to be haptic, with a need. So,
yeah.
I think it's really good.
Yeah, I wonder, say for different people, if you want to distinguish them, maybe they can, on the phone or the iPad go like this, and it could pick up that pressure, soft to hard or whatever, and translate it back to your phone notification for that person. I mean, there's a lot to be explored. I mean, that's super complicated, but with AI, who knows? So what makes touch different to the other main senses is it's not located to a specific region. Instead, it's distributed across the entire body, through the touch sensory organ, which is the largest one, the skin, and our joints, muscles, and tendons. And typically, it's described into two modalities as well, kinesthetic and tactile. So kinesthetic is like forces and torques and sensed in the muscle, and tactile, such as pressure, shear, vibration. And these are, you know, and they have specialized sensory end organs known as mechanoreceptors, going a bit like nobody needs to know this. But so we were talking about, you know, some words to do with touch, and some with kinesthetic is more like position, orientation, and force. And touch is how to, I guess, to recognize material, and hot and cold as well. I always think that the phone, you know, again, it's like, why it'd be fun to have. It could be hot and cold. They could control that because it does get hot, right? So, in the least, they could use that element of it. And a funny thing as well, our body, if we're holding a tool like a rod, and the rod touches, you know, the TV at one point, we feel it as if it's in our body. We know where it is on the rod, and they think it's just because of the vibration. And that's something else to be explored. That your touch extends onto other things as part of your body, and there's a lot of work around that as well. So you could just be touching something here, but something else could be going on there, but you feel like it's happening to you, or you know exactly where it is.
If you can see, like a gun with a bullet, if you can see a reaction, but if you have a tactical control like puppeteering and you can see that, then that's instant feedback, and it's a very engaging thing because it's a kind of novel extension of your natural self. So it's a very interesting way to drag people into a bit of showcraft.
Yeah, and in VR they use that a lot of, you become something else, or you project onto a tool or a gun.
And you do things you can't normally do.
Yeah, and you do things you can't normally do. So, I don't know, has anyone ever seen this? So the touch and the body stimulators, they kind of go back to military simulations and cybernetics. And you can see the person is sort of both the performer and spectator. They're being researched. And this allows us and unveils like we see our body in a different way after experiencing something like this. And this goes back to, I think it's in the 60s. And this is one of like the most famous precursors of multi-sensory story or VR. So this was meant to expand cinema with stereoscopic vision, wide frame, scripted smell, and haptics, such as wind and vibrations. What have things moved on that much from this like crude machine?
It's got smaller.
It's got smaller, but these arcade machines are exactly the same, and it's been patented, so that person must be still making loads of money. So a lot of effort's been into the technological aspects, but not so much the social mechanics of it, and and the kind of haptic actuators that have been developed have been, buzzers, electromuscle stimulation. Does anyone know what that is? Do you want to explain? Or?
Is that where you're for muscle repair?
They do use it in physiotherapy and the slender tone.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Literally electrocuting you with little zaps. But they've, I'll talk about it later. I've worked on a project for gaming using that as well. And after people get over the pain of it, they're like, okay, because actually you get either fatigue or desensitized, which is a bit strange as well. But, this used to be kind of a torture device, and now you're okay with it. Inflatables. Very hard to control. I know this kind of haptic very well, but it's a more organic experience. That if something inflatable touches you, and I think Disney Research had a jacket with air pockets as well. Pneumatics, yeah.
Interesting, very useful.
It's very and it's used a lot in robotics, soft robotics as well. It's quite hard to control though, but it's very subtle. Movement, I've said this like movement, but actually, if you just wear anything with weight or with drape, and you can move it around, it affects you. And I've played around with that as well. You know, it's virtually impossible to recreate a material, to simulate another material. It's very, very difficult. But why not just use that material and get it to move instead? Everyone's like, what are you talking about? But I'll show you in a minute. Transducer. So I've used this as well. So this is like electrical plates which turns and can turn anything into a speaker. But actually, if you put it, say, behind your ear for bone conduction, it can vibrate through your body. So that's an interesting output. So you could, your whole body can feel, say, music. And then, yeah, material itself. And use cases that we've talked about. You can have relational comparison. So you can compare different things through haptics to quickly alert or warn, you know, through the notifications. When there's a demand for rapid references, and they use this in military a lot, where you can relate someone's trying to communicate with you in a certain context, and you sort of learn that communication, warning, different types of environmental conditions which handicap auditory and visual presentation as well. You know, firefighters, for instance, if they can't see, but they can haptically communicate. So there's quite, you know, it's used quite a lot. So in terms of consumer use, Nintendo actually experimented with different home consoles. Let me just show you this. It's very...
It came from the third dimension with its own brain, its own voice, its own legs. There's only one problem. It needs your eyes. Virtual Boy. See it now in 3D.
Okay, another bit of dystopia. I think both VR and haptics, which is, you know, where it's been connected and developed in the past, it's had such like a very distinct press. You know, the way it's being presented, the PR on it, like we can't disassociate it. People can't seem to look out of that because that's how it's been for decades and decades.
Why is that?
Why is that? Some of it, I think, where the people who had the money, you know, maybe military, gaming, medical, so then it becomes a utility item, and then if it's a utility, you know, it's never going to move to something more humanizing. There's something patriarchal about technology. It looks like something that's been on the desk and comes and hits you, basically. I think that the aesthetics and the content have been quite parallel up till that point, and it's been very much an output and input sort of vision of perception. If we stick this on you, you will react in a certain way. If we zap you in a certain way, this will happen to you. It's very binary and probably constrained by, you know, processing power more than anything else.
Almost mechanical, because a lot of the sort of notifications that you get actually look like instantaneous. It's sort of almost like a sort of a rat training type process, as opposed to perhaps a softer element of touch and which is more human.
Yeah, it just hasn't come from a human experience or perception.
It's very much laboratory, and I guess if you're doing something in the future, then a nuclear war is always a good setting. A post-nuclear war is always a good setting for a future technology, isn't it? I suppose.
Always, yeah, because that's
Well, for a film
yeah.
point of view, I think that's what they go for.
Yeah, it would be nice to disassociate, to like pull that apart though. There was a company called Virtuality in '95. Do you know? Is anyone aware of this? So they did a thing for IBM where they created VR for construction and builders, and they had a glove as well, and which is really, so that was back in '95, 25 years ago, and actually architecture has adopted VR and haptics alongside it, and controllers. So, you know, I mean, VR died, as we know, in the early 2000s and has been resurrected and may die again, the way it's going. But sort of certain industries have adopted it and they don't really need it for anything other than the content, though it could probably be a lot more ergonomic. And well, you know, I do talk about sort of diversity sometimes. I get asked to talk about that. And obviously we know that like design, particularly in these areas, has been made for white men by white men. You know, that's a stat. But that has to change. So, because these industries are changing, so women need VR headsets which fit them because they have female engineers, for instance. So, oh, sorry, I don't want to see that again. So these are some of the products you may have seen that are already out there. So yeah, with materials and compact electronics, there has been much more, you know, a tacit exploration and understanding of digital mediated touch. And some of the examples. Does anyone know any of these ones? So a few gloves, some are kind of more motion capture, and then they have vibrations on them. This is the haptics glove, and it has little pressure sensors. And I actually got to try it, and they had so much funding. And it was all kind of like botched together. And I know you can hire it out like for 50 grand a day or something. But it was amazing. You know, you put your VR headset on and you're there and it's cumbersome as anything. And you're like, this is not how, I can't believe this is happening. Why am I doing this? And then you're like, you can feel rain and you can feel a ball and you can throw the ball and things. But it was one of actually the best experiences I've had. But it's so far from a consumer product, and maybe it'll never be a consumer product. This is the Tesla suit. Anyone tried that? You know about it. So they use electromuscle stimulation. They zap you across the body, and you know their software can zap you at different levels, and it can produce heat. Again, they're a Belarus company, and I think they've got a military contract with the Russian government. They're really nice people, but you see where the funding, you know, for these kind of things come from. So this one's got vibrations, that's a sound shirt, which is Cute Circuit. The Sub Pack, anyone know that? You may have tried it.
For listening to music and it puts the low frequencies through the body?
Yeah, so it puts the bass through you. And Ultra Haptics or Leap Haptics, because they bought Leap Motion.
Kind of they can be the most successful because you don't need all the, because a lot of the gloves and things,
Yeah.
as you say, the engineering is questionable, but the effect can be amazing, but they're quite unreliable.
Yeah, as well, yeah.
Quite unreliable, but
Yeah.
the ultrasonic systems where that you
More
can actually
electron.
feel focused ultrasonics are actually great because you don't have to have another interface.
Have you tried it?
I spoke to a few companies that do that kind of thing for various projects and things. I did do a demo at Inition, who in East London, recently.
Yeah, but the Leap Technologies had the most funding.
Yeah, and a lot of that.
But they've had the most funding. So I mean, it's not coincidence that it's working the best. They've got 4 times more funding than everybody else.
Yeah. But in a way of humanising this and going away from the dystopia, the disaster, having something that you don't have to wear that's possibly unreliable, you're taking away another layer of blocking it. You want to just be in a performance. You don't want to have to dress up necessarily to kind of engage. So it can be much more better in a kind of show class sense.
I guess it's sort of a much wider experience because a few people can experience it at the same time. It's really subtle. So one of the founders, he now runs a research group at Brighton actually. He's a really cool guy. Because I said, what drives you? Why I was thinking you must be so rich. Why are you still tinkering away at all these different projects? And he said, I like to make the things which are impossible possible. So that's what drives him every morning. And he was saying the people who've been interested in their projects, and they had the feeling as well, but he also showed me in a box one of his students. So they had all this, sort of sonic, or it looks like, I guess, like air. That's what it feels like. And they had a little ball, and they could move the ball. so that's how accurate it was in terms of feeling. And they had like a song, and it was like moving this ball around. So that's pretty cool, but it was so subtle. And their future is probably in the car. So when you have a response, when we have autonomous cars, or even now, you won't have buttons anymore, but people want to feel that feedback. So you want to feel like you're, turning the volume up, for instance, but they'll do it through air. So that's the dream. Yeah, I have no idea how they could possibly, I guess you can't have the window down.
Sorry, there is a company with the polystyrene ball, the ultrasound.
Yeah.
They're moving it so quickly now through light that it's creating holograms because
Wow.
it's moving in 3 dimensions. So they're drawing with light with this very light polystyrene ball. And it's an extension of that technology.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of funding, but it's all happening in the labs around the world, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Interestingly, talking about going away from knobs and buttons, the American military have recently banned touchscreen controls from their ships because I think last year they lost 8 or 10 soldiers when a very modern ship crashed very heavily into another one of theirs because it was a touchscreen control that they weren't properly trained in and it wasn't intuitive. And they've literally banned non-physical controls, literal controls, because if you don't have the right training, you crash and kill people.
That's really interesting. Oh my goodness! So they don't even have the red button. It's like, yeah.
They panicked.
Where's the red button? I know. I'll just put my hand all over it. Yeah.
Put a little unit out, but they're not going to use it.
That's
So
game over, isn't it?
God.
Just on another level, I'm aware that the sort of innovators in space like Richard Branson and so forth was a project I became aware of, is how do you train billionaires, so to speak, to go into space.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they're not fit, they're not trained astronauts. A lot of this technology was thought about, and they're still trying to innovate how they train these billionaires to go and spend a week in space.
Mm.
And it's, I think those are the new boundaries of where this technology will work. And you talked about architecture, and in fact Crossrail used a lot of virtual reality technology in the creation of Crossrail, which is
Maybe it's
done.
about watching Euro.
Exactly.
There's a tunnel.
It's there, honestly. Put these on.
Yeah, all better now. Yeah, there's sort of the training and things which you literally, it's so hard to create in, the diorama or create that scene here. And actually astronauts even use VR and haptics to see what things might feel like, I guess through their algorithms, from previous data. The one thing are there any sort of fashion people here at all? I don't know. Aesthetic is the same. Yeah. Still, it's just like, it's not, it's supposed to be a neutral look. It's so not neutral. It's dehumanizing. It's ugly.
It's isolating.
It's isolating, and yeah.
Everyone's trying to, they're talking about digital avatars, but then suddenly you're talking to some other disembodied person that you don't really relate to.
Isn't that where HoloLens is much better? Because HoloLens you see through, you still talk to people. And you can have your audio down through your phone, because the little wind tank computer sits around behind your ear. It's a lot better for that.
It's a lot better for human connection, but still sort of limited, unfortunately.
Well, it's limited,
But
you know,
as a,
just
yeah.
got past a tiny little square field of vision, so
Yeah.
it's a bit more 16:9, but it's I think that will have a lot more legs and duration than the VR headsets, because you just closed off basically.
Yeah. So looking at all of this, I first got into haptics and VR in 2015. I guess that's where it came out. I was a consultant at Unit 9 to develop an EMS prototype. And even at that point, they were thinking about having these exoskeleton robotic kind of hands and integrating it to VR so you get force feedback for a game. And, it was Innovate UK funded, so it wasn't a commercial project in that sense, but we wanted to take it up to a prototype. And at the same time, the Tesla suit came out, but they got, the Russian government to fund them. And I'd been working in wearables for a while, and so I just really wanted to soften it all up. So I used sort of kind of smart materials, embedded as much as I could away from, you know, the electronics to electronic thread. I actually worked with a guy from London College of Fashion to knit electronics, and it would stretch but not lose resistance. So just, you know, really kind of thinking, is there a material second skin kind of way? And we showed it a lot in the gaming community to iterate it as well. So it was an interesting experience. You know, we didn't take it to market, but it like opened my eyes. And, you know, we fulfilled everything for the grant. But then I was kind of thinking, it's still such a lost opportunity to add sort of fashion aesthetic. And I know to get adoption or to get things out there, the sort of the fashion picture has such a big outreach, you know, much more than these dystopia. I've got a box on my head, and obviously she's got a box on her head as well. But I just for fun, I just thought I'll create this costume around it. And I worked with an engineer who was a filmmaker, and his husband actually sort of said, "Why don't you guys do it on dark matter?" And I was like, "No, that's impossible. Even the scientists don't know what dark matter was." But actually, it's sort of the perfect topic for virtual reality, because dark matter and dark energy make up 95% of our observable, you know, universe. So I was like, okay, you know, like with the space, it's something that nobody knows about, so no one can contest it. So it's not like we're simulating reality. But we can have a thing where we can fly through the universe. And we didn't even have we weren't Unity coders, but we used a free software called Space Engine. I don't know if you've heard of this. So this astronomer, programmer, hobbyist has simulated the whole of the universe with real data, and you can fly through the universe and render it into 3D. So, you know, it's amazing. So just as a kind of, just to see what we could do. And in terms of haptics, we played around, does a person go into a room and balloons hit them, and it could be like, you know, particles and energy. And then we kind of came up with the idea of, why don't we hack a blood pressure machine and have a haptic track which sends boosts of air, so it could be quite subtle. And actually on the neck piece, we put buzzers as well, and we had conductive Velcro, so when you, you know, went like that, it kind of started it off. And, you know, ended up, you know, it's a complete experiment. And it actually got quite a lot of traction, won some awards, you know, showed it all around the world. But I always kind of felt like it's not interactive, so it doesn't work. So I'm showing it to all these people, and you always get cues of women as well, which was great, because all the other sort of VR things you wouldn't. So I'm like, okay, the fashion, it does offer something different. I had people saying, it's, you know, it's crazy costume, but it's less scary than wearing a headset on its own.
It's more engaging for the person watching the person using it.
And it creates, yeah.
I mean, better, more engaging
Yeah.
than another system.
Exactly. So the other thing, when you're waiting in a gallery setting in the queue, your experience of VR is longer in the queue watching someone else than the experience itself.
It's
So,
often down to production costs of the VR.
what's that, sorry? Often done.
Often down to the production costs of the VR itself.
Yep. And so it makes the person, the spectator of the VR, the performer as well. They become part of the art. And people, you know, this, you know, we use fabric manipulation. So the outside itself wasn't wearable technology, but people felt it was tactile. They're like, it's moving, because it touched so much of you as you moved around in reaction to flying through the universe. But I didn't put any electronics to affront you. That was how people
reacted.
reacted.
Their imagination just watching the person
Yeah.
using it, which is again is a really great showcraft element, isn't it? It's a really good cheat in a way.
Yeah.
To use really lovely fine art clothing with a high technology just to make it much more engaging for the passive spectator, let alone the person that's actually involved.
Yeah, and when people put it on, they knew something different was going to happen. And the other thing that I was, very sort of insecure about, I can't switch everything on at the same time. The VR, the haptics, the buzzers, and we did have an app that didn't quite work, and nobody minded because people were filling in the gaps. So the Zap track, the haptic track, and the VR itself, people connected them all. And I did find as well.
That's classic theatre. That's classic theatre, isn't it? Because if something goes wrong, there's enough going on.
Yeah.
Having worked in the feature industry for a long time, if you can distract the camera and the director just long enough with something else until things start working again, you're doing all right, and it's the same thing.
Yeah. I guess the one thing I would say is people enjoyed it more when they were sitting down, and people, well, there were two things. No one could hear the VR in the gallery setting, and I don't know if anyone's shown VR. This happens a lot. People can't hear. So I actually created a hood as well in a sort of similar way. So, and it was again more costume, but then they were encased in it, and people preferred to sit down in the experience because there was so much going on. But yeah, it was like a disruption in the sense I was like, oh, let's try this. No one's tried that. Let's see what happens. And actually, people like it and still talk about it. So I've got a small video.
This is the universe.
Oh God, that's me talking. So I'm changing it. I'm changing like no. So, and all the while, I would love to go and actually show at the demos, just to see feedback. And I think this is another area when people do a lot of the design or the creativity. They're not there when the general public. The old lady in the V&A is trying it on, the kid is trying it on, what the parents are saying in response, like you don't get to really be there and see it. So it's just for insights. And what I got from it was that people wanted the garment to be much more literally represented in the VR. Not necessarily you wearing it in the VR, but they wanted a much closer representation. And they kind of wanted to see touch. So the spectator, they didn't want the buzzers or the touch to be embedded in. And I was like, that's a bit strange. But I thought, how do we show touch that is also felt? But I didn't want to use lights, for instance. So I did actually a small sustainable collection and rendered it in and put it into the VR. And I did a couple of garments where I thought, wouldn't it be interesting? So the actual VR bit was a bit baffling. There were just models walking around and you had to move out of the way, and then you could zap something and the flower prints came out of this. But it was of the garments that you were wearing. But we made kinetic dresses, so the garment moved around. Again, it was not interactive, but you would move out of the way of the models. The garment drape would not flow in the physics that you would expect. It would be counterintuitive, so you felt like something was touching you. So it sort of disrupted the physics of of what you'd expect. And at this stage, I actually brought back in some sustainable choices. As I said, it was, printed on organic cotton. And I worked on some of the collection with an immigrant women's charity called Heba. So a little video about that. So, and I guess it was a bit like I'd done the EMS, like literally you were being electrocuted. I'd, played with the buzzers, which is the most, I guess, widely experienced digital mediated touch that people have been exposed to. The inflatables, the pneumatics, which was probably a bit more subtle, so moving more and more away from the zap. And then I just wanted to see the garment actually, it's just literally the fabric is brushing you, like as subtle as possible. And that actually led to winning the Horizon 2020 Innovation Grant to create sustainable wearable technology. So I decided to experiment further and explore these avenues. And I had a mentor. I had to have a mentor as part of the EU grant, and it was the head of R&D for Intel, this guy called Valerio, and he was like, I think you should experiment in a way that you're going to fail. I was like, I don't think so. But I think what he was saying was really push it to the limit. And it led me, it led me to, I'll go back to the video, to create the most complicated technology experience, VR, which I'm still tinkering on to make cohesive. We tried, we went through, it was multiplayer at one stage. We used these experimental boards. It was going up to, but you could zap each other, but at the same time you were seeing each other in like a VR social room through half Bluetooth, half Wi-Fi, OSC. It was just crazy, but I learned so much. And then in terms of the haptics, we went through sort of plastic inflatables we made ourselves, and these are like silicon tentacles, and my whole team were like, it's so embarrassing, do not do that, do not do the tentacles. But, you can imagine it was phallic as anything, but it's so organic that people really respond to it in a grotesque way. They're like, ew, but they kind of came away with that memory, and it's still quite, it's fought under the water, and there was a tentacle in the experience. And it was an activist story. It was about plastic pollution, and that's why it's called GhostNet. And I don't know if you know what ghost nets are. It's old fishing nets which are discarded, and they just last for 500 years, and they carry on fishing and killing animals even though they're not being used by anyone. So it was a kind of, really how do we make it as creative as possible? And then these garments as well was a sort of kimono-esque. I think when I've been doing costume, I've tried to make capes as much as possible, so it's one size fits all. And the prints as well, I created in VR with Google Tilt Brush. So it's totally modal. So let's have a quick look at the...
Only 9% of plastic ever produced has been recycled. It is estimated that 8 million tons of plastic enter the sea globally and spread all around the world to the furthest regions in the Arctic and Southern Ocean, and has been found in the world's deepest underwater trench. Plastic can also degrade further to become smaller pieces, called microplastic.
We did have a pneumatic piece there as well on around the waist. And also these ones, the actual controller of the haptics could be, or the actuator, you could plug and play. So I tried to componentize it so we could carry on developing different things. You could put a network of, pneumatic pipes in, and you could control it via the controller. So stuff would happen in the VR and also be outputted to the haptics as well. So the kind of the framework is there, but it's super experimental, and I really wish I wouldn't narrate my own videos. And then I did a little, I'll just show you someone wearing, I did this demo, I presented a paper at a conference recently. So this was one of the haptic pieces. It looks like a bit like a dragon's tail, and then expanded, and we had these like sort of pyramids, and she's like, oh, what's going on? I guess the biggest challenge, I'll just go on. Biggest challenge with that one is deflation. I didn't realize it's as complicated to deflate something as to inflate something. So I need another grant to do that bit. But as a piece, we've created it in a way that you can quickly deflate it by, taking the pipe out and putting it back in. And then recently I had a commission by this curator who has a family member who was born blind or impaired senses. So this is where I used a transducer, and you had like a VR scene, quite an abstract VR scene representing a forest. And then the transducer would allow you to feel the music of that forest, but also I encased the controller in this Sony Walkman, upcycling, and just there was a pulse sensor, so you would hold it and you'd have this kind of funny white noise in the forest, and then it would feel your pulse, and then that would affect the noise and create kind of a beat. Again, it'd create, not music, but it'd create a beat, so take a white noise into jarring into something more engaging. So it's like sort of your own song. And the transducer, the bone conduction. So the curator said, the audio sounds like jarring white noise, but then your pulse creates a rhythm, consequently turning it into a tune, and you feel it through your whole body, immersed in your own multisensory song. And what I found really interesting, one of the people who tried it was blind. And I was thinking, why would she wear the headset when she's blind? But again, it was the ritual of doing something, and she seemed to be less upset by the white noise, whereas other people who tried it, they didn't even get to the pulse bit. They're like, I can't, this is just so technical, I'm not part of this, what's going on? I feel this is upsetting, but they didn't get to, let's surrender, actually, and be much calmer about it. That was the blind lady using it. She couldn't stop. I was like, oh, wow. And then just a quick one. I don't know how long I've been talking for, actually. So I got another grant recently, and we're developing a story called Oceanfried, which is a Nordic female empowerment heritage story. So the VR isn't on here, but I just want to show you what we've used. So we've used sort of fish leather from Icelandic waters. We have encased this Oculus Quest with it. We kind of used some ergonomic aspects to change where it fits on the face. We found that when we asked a lot of women with the Quest, they're like, oh, it hurts my cheeks. And we kind of have a counterweight as well. I'd love to get some feedback on this if you just want to pass it around, just for material. So you don't feel the plastic, you feel this. And also, when you see that, what do you think straight away? What kind of environment would you be in? Comfortable. Sorry, comfortable?
Warm, nature.
Yeah, it's awesome. Arctic. Yeah, it automatically sets you in a cold place, doesn't it? You don't even have to go into the scene. You can turn this around. Send it around, sorry. And this is sort of for the battery pack to counterweight it.
How do you deal, one of the main issues with headsets and things can be when it's shared is hygiene.
Yeah.
So the good thing about elements like this could be washed, but
Yeah.
also during a day, if you've got hundreds of people kind of transferring and transmitting with these things during a live event, it can be useful to swap patches and things like that.
Yeah.
So I've seen projects where this has been done just for hygiene issues, let alone, theatrical dressing or something like that.
Yeah, so exactly. Again, it's componentized. You can, it can be changed during the day.
Makes it relatable, because that's what I often, with all this tech, it's so sort of futuristic. You hold it a bit like foreign. You put it on, and I often get it's almost suffocated by it. 'Cause it's so like you're just about to go deep sea diving type of thing. Like, oh God, you need to stay alive. But this kind of makes you feel like actually this could be something that you could relate to.
I had one feedback. Someone said, "Oh, maybe this could come apart and just be like a hat in the winter." Why not? It's using sort of high-end luxury materials.
The fish net is very expensive, isn't it?
It's very expensive, yeah.
It also feels like less, I suppose, cold, because that's going back right to your point in the beginning, it's been designed for other purposes.
Yes.
And some of the people maybe that certainly in the early days of development have been people that are used to cold sort of material on their face and stuff, whereas I think this really allows it to become more sort of tactile and it makes it feel slightly warmer.
Yeah.
And maybe opens it up to people if you like,
Opens it for a wider audience, definitely. So like I said at the beginning, you're getting kind of young people there, women there as well, whereas it's listening to the tech.
Yeah.
So it opens it up to more people, so more people can engage with it, and like I say, more relatable as well. So.
I think you should do a haptic onesie. That'd be my little thing. Big one with a bed.
Yeah, I'll bring my tape measure, Andy. And, yeah.
That's sort of, not that's a onesie, but I've seen you wear onesie before.
Onesies are great. I know everyone's pretending like they don't have one, but...
No, it's just having that sort of, it being a bit more, cosy and, that sort of stuff.
It's humanising, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the lab and in sort of Microsoft or wherever, and NASA, they use lots of plastics and metals because it's a lab. That's a compromise. They want the technology.
Yeah.
They're not worried about the ergonomics and the aesthetics. That's the next level of this type of product development, is to take it so you can give it to my 12, 13-year-old daughter and she doesn't snag herself on it or something like that. It's got to be safe.
Yeah.
It's got to be a teddy bear, isn't it?
Yeah. I think for VR to be adopted outside of gaming, for sure, and even in gaming, it'll bring new people in, and we've kind of tried to design it around more the female head as well, and we just thought it'd be like, who's doing that? And I think it would just be interesting to see what response we get, if any. The fact that it is kind of soft, it's a bit more moldable as well for different shapes. And just play around with the different leathers. This whole, it's a funny thing. I didn't think it would be so disruptive by just using natural materials.
People are so ingrained in seeing what it is as it is that the idea of actually just humanising it is quite a shock, isn't it?
Yeah. I just don't think it's in the brief of this product development.
Tech is not meant to be touchy, is it? The tech is hardware.
See, that's the wrong. That is literally.
Well, it's not my opinion.
No, but I'm saying all these sort of traditional words puts it in a category. Yeah, hardware. What's that?
I know like blankets and being swaddled, and also the sleep industry is just huge.
Yeah.
Just thinking something like VR sleepscapes.
Oh, that's a nice idea. Yeah.
Just thinking like that. Just to me, it's taken VR to a very, like you said, more tactile and human and
quite comforting.
Yeah. And it's interesting because VR is so tech and you're so away from it, and actually sleep is a very private thing. And I don't know.
Yeah, and VR is essentially an intimate experience. Actually, I've been talking to friends at Singapore Hospital about rehab, and and some of the patients they are just they just lie down. So even the mindfulness apps that are out there, it's completely the wrong position to watch them because they're lying down. But then the way it sits on the face, it's it can rub. It can be quite traumatizing in itself and much more of a confinement rather than a comfort. and a swaddle. So it's definitely, yeah, a massive area. And hospitals are starting to use it in terms of mental health. So yeah, this is, yeah, but sleep as well-being, I'll definitely look into that.
I think you mentioned something earlier which was really interesting about people wanting to sit down. And
Yeah.
And I think body position and environment is really important with all these experiences.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if anyone's actually done a VR experience underwater.
Someone has done just recently, like, yeah, a swimming one.
Yeah.
Bungee jump, haven't they?
You're in water, but you're experiencing a VR experience.
Yeah, they have.
Yeah.
There's a flotation tank system
Yeah.
you actually wear VR. And going back to your hospital point, there's a lovely thing in the last 3 or 4 years where they've started embedding sensors for heartbeat and other sensors in teddy bears to put in the ICU units for children, so for babies. So again, it's that whole softening technology, which is, you know, if you want people to relate to it or to care about it, it can't be a killer robot. You know, it has to be
Yeah.
lovable.
What do you think of, you know, the Sony dog comes out from time to time?
I think a dog that you don't have to pick up after is probably really good.
So that's part that makes it human.
Yes. You should have responsibility.
Refeed it back in front of us.
I don't know, with children's toys, you know, the Slime Mania, you have the poop ones, and my 6-year-old daughter loves them. But yeah, you have these squeezy toys, and they poop out slime.
Slime is massive. My daughter's all over slime.
And it's so, yeah, and it's so tactile. And I just,
as well. They love
yeah,
it. They love the chemistry.
they love making it, and it's everything that technology isn't, actually.
Yeah, it's great.
I'm always like so anti-technology when I speak about it. So we've got just a small video. It does play, I don't know why, oh yeah, there it is. So those are the... there's no sound on this one. So I think even with, you know, ultimately these will probably disappear, these kind of headsets, and we'll have things like HoloLens. I know that there's that company, you know, with the contact lens. Is that actually, can you actually wear that, or is that just completely, does anyone know?
Yeah, they've developed it. Sorry. I was reading about it last week. They have developed now a contact lens that you can put content onto it and wear it.
They had them at CES, but no one was allowed to wear them.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
They're quite low res at the moment, but
Like a lot of stuff at CES.
Yeah. You don't touch it. The issue's always hygiene and issues with infection and hygiene when you do anything membrane based.
Yeah.
The CIA has, through American research, laser systems that can read your heartbeat and your emotional state, and it can recognise you as an individual from hundreds of meters. So I would imagine that all of that technology will be superseded by light and laser based and integrated in our systems, because there's just no hygiene issues, there's no interface issues. It's just, you can't go wrong. You can target some kind of killer drone at you, but it can't hurt your eyes. So.
Yeah.
But and also as an entertainment thing, I think it's going to be very much superseded by these arm's length technologies, you know, sensors.
It does make sense. It's quite an onus on the user to be able to put it in properly, not break it. I mean,
I've never worn a contact lens in my life, so I wouldn't have a clue.
I worn them, but I certainly wouldn't share them with somebody else.
Yeah. How much do they have a price on each one? Yeah. On each pair, or?
God knows how much it'd be. I mean, HoloLens, when it came out, was huge amounts per headset. The headsets are still quite, they've come down a lot in price, but making content for it that's relevant to each room that you're in, that it's mapping, is still, it's how long's your piece of string?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all military funding, isn't it?
Yeah.
Things are for military tracking, but a lot of people just put a camera on the whatever the safety helmet they're wearing is, but that's different to a kind of overlaid reality kind of headset, which is what they're looking for ultimately for the military.
I mean, I've got to say, out of all the headsets, I think HoloLens is fantastic.
Uh-huh.
When you get it in properly, I've had some test headsets, 1 and 2. You walk into like a room this size, it'll map the room, and then it generates the content that it's got laid in the device to fit inside the room. So then you can walk next door, it'll take the same content and generate that for the shape of that room. So everything is relatable.
Yeah.
You see people across it, it's great. I mean, I've got I had a test headset for a week or so back home a few years years ago, it was only HoloLens 1. I think my daughter was 7 at the time, and it took her about 30 seconds after I explained it to her to get this.
Right.
To
Yeah.
change content and to play stuff back. She was like, oh, I get this. This is great. And she loved it because she could see everybody. So if
Yeah.
she wanted to ask me a question, she'd go to look at me and ask me, and I don't know, you'd be more inside the camera view. And she's like, okay. And 30 seconds, and she was playing with it.
And Magic Leap?
Magic Leap and HoloLens together is great.
Yeah.
It's again, because they're two separate things at the moment. You still
Yeah.
have to code the two of them together to make something that's really good.
Okay. So obviously we're talking about sort of, haptics and VR, and it's per person, it's hard to distribute, it's an intimate experience. But they have started using it in kind of more group gallery shows. Did anyone see Ocean of Air by Marshmallow Laserfeast?
Yeah. One of the best experiences. And again, you could see the other 6 or 7 people there, and the blowing was nice.
Yes, yeah.
The thing that was nice about it was that you were actually concentrating on the topic, not the technology.
Yeah.
Anyone else go to it?
Yeah. Like I say, you were witnessing people doing it again and again and again. So by the time you got it, you were like, right, okay, I'm going to be on the floor, I'm going to be on the wall.
I actually found it quite soulful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to push it. Be like, okay, if I do this, not very good.
And The Void, the Star Wars experience, they had at places like Westfield. Basically you went in and you were shooting stormtroopers. So I think that was with a sub pack, so you'd feel the bass. And I think the room would get like, you felt like you were going in a lift and this and that, but obviously you were just really in the same kind of warehouse. You felt like getting warm. It was limited. It was a shooting game, but it was interesting to see it was booked out. And then other public performance and events. The National Youth Theatre did Frankenstein, so they had I guess if people are seated, then it's quite easy to give them stuff to do. You can put things in the seat. 4D cinema is not there yet, but you can make it much more cohesive. The other thing I was thinking about, if you have anything like a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, or even if you have your phone next to you, you could send a zap to everybody and create like a social experience.
There's a technology called Chirp, which uses both audible and non-audible sound from your phone, and is then received by the microphone of the phone, and that can be used to trigger bespoke and specific events that can be linked up to any other technology.
Okay.
Just through inaudible sound. It's very simple. And just briefly on phones, my daughter was blowing into her phone microphone recently, and it converted that intensity into playing music on the phone.
Oh, nice.
So this idea of blowing and using normal sensors rather than ultra technology, but
Yeah.
creatively, the narrative is much more important than technology, and equally a film script is much better than 4D in my opinion. If you've got a good script,
Yeah.
you don't need 4D.
That's what I don't like about the 4D stuff. It distracts.
Yeah.
It's distracting you from good film.
If in doubt, you've got
Yeah.
the effects on it. It's what they say in the film industry.
Gavin at Quanda's done the bubble thing where they've got a tablet, it's got bubbles on it, and you blow the bubbles on the
Yeah,
tablet,
yeah.
and it drives a real bubble machine.
Oh, that's really, I really like that, yeah.
It's brilliant.
So there's obviously, the analog to digital, the interaction, the touchback, the sort of materials. I guess it has to be done quite cohesively. But if you're like making a film, then you add stuff on afterwards. It's never
Got to
like,
talk to
yeah.
the producer about that. It's good to have an idea up front of what you want. The thing about anything creative, if you give people complete freedom that digital visual effects can, they often get really excited and go over the top. But often budgetary constraints and good narrative kind of rein people in, and they have to work within a constraint, which, as you know, and everyone knows here, is often the best results.
Yeah. So, sustainability. So anything with touch obviously requires materials. And I've put this slide in over the last, it's usually what I talk about. And I guess, am I preaching? I don't know. It's quite, if you're in a position to choose, it's quite good to just see if there are alternatives, if you can componentize, if you can reuse, because that will actually save you money, if you can even be more efficient, then there's less waste. I'm not, I'm not sort of a vegan. I'm not in any way a pure person when it comes to sustainability or ethics. But I know if I do something and just consider the way that I create or put things out there, the choices I make, it will make a difference cumulatively. So for you guys as well. And this, has anyone seen this, Skin On? I just want to show this as, it's not even my thing, but I'm so inspired by it. So this is by Mark Tessier, and I just really love it. I just think it's the future. Nothing will, everything will keep its integrity, like organic integrity. Oops, sorry.
Soft like that, you put a sensor in, it can go back to hard. So it's very important to keep that feeling of organic through it, I think.
Oh man, it's the one thing that, what shall I do? I don't have the video. You can imagine, okay. Let me see, I have it here.
Such a clean desktop.
Oh, okay. I think you might have to imagine mine. Okay, I'm sorry.
Hide everything on your desktop. So just hide everything.
But then I'd never find it.
Then you just make it reveal again. Great.
Oops. Everything's just stuck now. Sorry, the internet has dropped out. But yeah, so if anybody has any questions, go for it. Said everything.
Comment. Thank you for that. It was all really interesting. Somebody earlier mentioned luxury materials, and right at the beginning of this, you got me thinking about how, as we design experiences for clients and attendees and participants in events, we've seen a lot of examples today of virtual and augmented mixed reality, but it's actually made me think more about the reality, the environments that we create and the materials that we use and the effects those have on the experience. Because our business is the technology, the audio, visual, lighting, staging, etc. But actually soft furnishings and materials and the environment you create has a huge impact. But I guess the dichotomy is that luxury is natural materials, leathers, furs, hardwoods, etc., etc. But then what the challenge for all of us is to figure out how we develop really enhanced experiences through the use of materials in a sustainable way. Because, forever high technology married with luxury materials is kind of that's the sort of the uber luxury sort of experience, isn't it? But that's not sustainable.
Certainly nothing's really sustainable when you make these kind of experiences or consumer product, or unless it's closed looped and it goes right back in and you kind of reuse. But you can just shift things a little bit. You can make certain choices, certain accents. It's very hard to move away from plastic. That's the real problem. But if you want to, you can just, I've got these range of materials. I'm just going to use this. Maybe some other suppliers already used it. I can upcycle it, for instance.
And I think Richard was talking earlier about loading plastics with denser material to make them feel more quality rather than cheapening the experience because it's very lightweight.
Well, plus 3D printed, I use PLA, which is a bioplastic which can biodegrade. So my conscience is slightly salved by doing that, and I don't use oil-based plastic and things like that. But also, firms are actually recycling and reusing. And as you said earlier, what can I do? I'm not a paragon of virtue personally, but if everyone does just something, then it's better than nothing, isn't it? Whatever that might be.
And I think the challenge is the sort of the personalisation of VR, which is where you're going with this, and this is what myself and Frankie spoke about, where we all have this sort of have had this VR stuff enforced on us, and it has been a really cold sort of personal experience. And I think breaking those barriers and ingraining not only the VR but the experiences like Frankie does and some of the other bits and pieces that we need to do to create the sort of true experience will be the challenge going forward. It's just like it's not a shared experience, it will never be a shared experience, but how can we broaden that so that the person that's watching on or even the person inside has sort of a relation to the outside world. And I think if we can break that down, that will be where it comes into
It's having that, it's having the stepping stone between you and the experience. And the stepping stone, something that you already understand and know, and the stepping stone here is the touch, the feel. We all know what fur is, we all know what leather is. So suddenly we already understand something about this. So therefore we're going to be more engaging with the actual experience itself. When something is so unrelatable, it becomes a bit numb to it.
And I think you've almost had that point of being embarrassed.
Yeah.
When you're standing on a trade stand and you have something and you're doing something, you're very self-aware. I know I'm very self-aware when, who's watching me, am I looking silly or, whatever it may be. And I think that's the key, is to try to sort of break through that and not have that. And that's where the real challenge, I think, lies. And that's why you go through numerous trade stands and you'll see these things just sort of laying there and people not engaging with them because there isn't that sort of way of drawing people into the experience.
It's not warm and cosy, is it?
No, it's not. It's very.
Also, there are liability issues, because if you're standing up and you get disorientated and fall over, there are very real liability issues.
Yeah, sort of maybe drinking and doing it at the same time.
We didn't talk about touch, but actually I feel like we were saying, touch is forbidden, but we're always touching. Like, we're always standing on our feet. Like, we take for granted standing and the connection between us and the floor. If we suddenly remove this connection with our shoes, suddenly everybody has to touch pure gravity. And actually, connection through feet is just as empowering or just as exciting as hands, if not more sometimes, because it's so
sensitive.
So sensitive, and it's also, we're not used to it.
Yeah.
And when suddenly you feel a connection between you and the floor, and maybe suddenly that texture has changed, like that's quite empowering as well. So suddenly if you have this, where you're saying, okay, we don't need to touch, or not have people just like randomly actually just our feet itself.
That's incredibly powerful. With L'Oreal, did a thing, we put grass inside a room and made everyone take their shoes and socks off before they went in. And that is a talking point, but everyone was connected with everybody else, and that grounded them. Done great giant day beds as well, shoes and socks off, cushions, chocolates.
It's great, because it gets into a playful element as well, because suddenly having your shoes off suddenly makes you quite playful.
And it's society, and it's opting in.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time today to chat to everyone. We really, really appreciate it. You're busy and you made the time to chat to everyone. And we'll continue to sort of grow these. And while Frankie's here, we always encourage our speakers to be involved in the community. And as John said earlier, we don't limit this to PRG. We want people to engage with you. So if you have any, we'll send out all of Bush's details so you can contact us directly. But I just want to say a massive thank you for taking the time today. Fantastic, great.
Thank you, everybody.